Let me tell you guys about my friend, Zach. So I'd like to welcome everybody for coming. So thank you. I'm the founder of H7. My name is Clay Hicks, and I'd like to introduce you to Zach. So Zach Parker is in our leadership cohort, and when he um, offered to be in here, I'm like, I like that. I like that action. And then, as you get to know Zach, you find out he's kind of all action. He ended up saying, "Hey, Clay, can I show you what we do?" So we got the opportunity to learn more about what he does by him taking us through the leadership game. He's a Maxwell guy. Okay, sorry, I talk like that because I love John Maxwell, and I've been studying him for 17 years, and SJ has too. Like we love Maxwell. So anyway, it's a conversation a lot in our staff, and so like Zach just says, "Hey, let's do this," and then he came in and he did this incredible job. So when he talks about leadership, he does have a way about him. If you listen in really well, there's just a ton of value in all the things he's talking about. So hopefully you guys have a great experience today. And I'd like to introduce Zach. He's out of Kentucky, which is also awesome. And he lives down there in Kentucky, and he really knows what he's talking about with leadership. So make sure you guys are listening in. If you have questions along the way, you'll obviously be welcome to ask and stop there and make sure you raise your hand. And if you have any questions, he'd be happy to answer them for you. So I'd like to introduce you to Zach.
Yes, sir.
All right. All right. So, as I said, my name is Zach Parker, and I am your friend, as John Maxwell says. I want to thank Clay for that kind introduction and the H7 Network for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm very excited to be here with you today and spend the next 45 minutes or so talking about this very, very important aspect of leadership that I think frequently gets overlooked. It's about how we communicate and connect with others. So what makes this time so special to me is that you could have been anywhere in the world. You could have chosen to do anything during this hour, but instead you chose consciously to share some of your precious heartbeats with me, and you're never going to get them back. So my goal is to repay that kindness by adding value to you over the next 45 minutes. I'm going to do that through the lens of communication and connection. So these are huge subjects, and I'm going to be drawing on John Maxwell's book titled Everyone Communicates, Few Connect to guide my comments, right? And if you've never seen the book before, if you can see my little picture, it looks like that, right? It's a fantastic book, highly recommend it. So my purpose here today is to raise your awareness of leadership as a teachable skill, right? It's not something that everybody is just born with and you can never do anything about it. It's a teachable skill. And I'm going to try to give you some really practical information that you can apply today following this session. I would like to convince you, if you're not already, that we're all leaders in one way or another. And leadership comes down to one thing. And that one thing is influence. Leadership is influence. And influence depends on our ability to connect with people. Only one thing stands between you and greater success in your personal and professional life. It isn't knowledge or skills or experience. It's not talent. It's your ability to connect with people. In a world where success depends on collaboration, connection isn't optional, it's essential. It's a common misconception that certain people are born with the ability to connect with other people, and yet the truth is anyone can learn how to make every connection, every communication an opportunity for a powerful connection. So now if I ask you, how many of you here want to improve your results? Probably every single hand is going to go up, right? Uh, even even the people who don't put their hand up, they definitely want to improve their results too, if they're being honest. Because the bottom line is, everybody wants to improve their results. So for some people, it's money. For others, it's time with family, time with friends. It's some people want to improve their results in their lifestyle, the way they live, or the relationships that they have, their health. And so what I've come to realize, and it's taken me far longer than it should have, but the truth is if you want to get better results, you've got to get better at connecting with people. Talking about a father or a mother, a spouse, son or a daughter, someone who runs their own business, an employee or a manager, a vice president or CEO. It doesn't really matter who you are. You can improve your results by improving your ability to connect and influence people in an ethical way. You want to improve your marriage, connecting will make a huge difference. Want a promotion? You need to connect with your boss in a better way, or your customers, or your peers, or your team. If you want to improve your relationships with your friends, it's all about connecting. We need people. You can't do anything on your own in today's world. We need to be able to connect and influence other people to succeed in this world. I sometimes use examples from the Bible, not to persuade anyone of the truth of Judaism or Christianity, but to highlight the enduring truth of the principles they reveal. So in Exodus 18, after Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, the people constantly came to him to settle their disputes and seek guidance. From morning until evening, he sat listening to every problem, every complaint, every question. And eventually his father-in-law, Jethro, saw this and wisely intervened. What you are doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone, Jethro says to Moses. And so Jethro's advice was select capable, trustworthy men to help judge smaller matters and only bring the most important matters to himself, right, to Moses. Moses followed this advice, and as a result, the burden was shared, the people were served more effectively, and Moses was able to focus on the higher calling of leading the nation. This passage powerfully illustrates that even the greatest leaders cannot succeed alone. Moses had divine guidance, but he still needed human connection, influence, and delegation to lead well. It shows that success in faith, leadership, or any endeavor comes not from solitary effort, but from empowering others and building a community that shares the mission. If the same challenges we face today were present 4,000 years ago, and humanity continues to find the same kinds of solutions effective, then it's worth considering that those principles which underpin the solutions might actually be timeless. The friction you experience in your day-to-day life comes down to leadership, connecting, and influence. Everything I'm talking about is 100% a teachable skill, which means you can learn to connect, you can learn to lead, you can learn to improve your ability to influence people if you want to. I spend a lot of time convincing people that the ability to connect isn't something you're born with, it's something you build. Yet the truth is, anyone can learn how to make every communication an opportunity for powerful connection. It's within your reach. It might be out of your comfort zone, but it's within your reach. The reason that learning to connect can make such a difference to your results, to all of your results, is that it's such a neglected skill. Most people don't give any thought whatsoever to developing their ability to connect with others, either because they don't see it as a skill or they don't see it as important. And because they don't give it any thought, it's outside their awareness. They're not conscious of the impact it has on them. And this probably wouldn't be such a problem if people weren't so emotional. Human beings are emotional creatures at heart. We have an intellect. We kid ourselves that we are rational, logical human beings, but that's a facade. We're emotional creatures. Emotions rule our lives. Why is this a problem? Well, how many of you have heard something like, he does that if you push his buttons, or you really need to know how to get her going? We can all be logical in certain situations, but there are others that, with a certain trigger or once the switch is flipped, we can't really help ourselves. This red cloud descends and the emotional storm just blows through us. Well, John Maxwell's book, Everyone Communicates, Few Connect, lays out a powerful learning system split into two parts: connecting principles and connecting practices. When you apply and live out these principles, they can completely transform your relationships at work, at home, and in every part of your life. Now, there's obviously a lot more to connecting than we can cover in one session. We could easily spend an entire day diving deep into these principles, but for now, I want to focus on a few key practices, practical things you can start using right away. If you've made the decision to strengthen your ability to connect with people, these tools will help you start doing that today. So, how many of you have heard of John Maxwell? Hopefully, everyone, right? Uh, how many of you heard of Ken Blanchard or Stephen Covey? Right. Probably most of you. So, what if I told you that John Maxwell is a number one New York Times best-selling author with over 100 books? He's a coach and a speaker who's sold more than 25 million copies of his books in 50 different languages. In 2014, he was identified as the number one leader in business by the American Management Association and the most influential leadership expert in the world by Business Insider and Inc. magazine. As the founder of the John Maxwell Company, the John Maxwell Team, Equip, and the John Maxwell Foundation, he's trained more than 5 million leaders. Recipient of the Mother Teresa Prize for Global Peace and Leadership from the Luminary Leadership Network, John Maxwell speaks each year to Fortune 500 companies, presidents of nations, and many of the world's top business leaders. More importantly, John is my friend. He's my business partner and mentor. He's one of the most skilled communicators and, more importantly, skilled connectors I've ever met. You don't need to understand why the techniques of connecting work. You just need to understand that the principles that underpin them and then apply them. You just need to understand that, those principles that underpin them and then apply them. One principle is that connecting increases your influence in every situation. According to the Harvard Business Review, the number one criteria for advancement and promotion for professionals is an ability to communicate effectively. Presidential historian Robert Dallek says that successful presidents exhibit 5 skills and qualities that enable them to achieve things that others don't. They are number 1, vision, number 2, pragmatism, number 3, consensus building, number 4, charisma, and number 5, trustworthiness. Let's put aside our political opinions and biases for a moment and look at the abilities of some past presidents. For those of you who are a little older, like me, or weirdly into watching old political discussions on YouTube, like me, you might remember the debate between Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan. Consider the differences in connecting skills between Reagan and Carter during that election. During the debate, Carter came across as cold and impersonal, constantly quoting facts and figures. In contrast, Reagan was engaged with the audience and even with Carter himself. Reagan connected with the audience and the American people and was called the Great Communicator. Many years ago, I worked in a call center. I started as a seasonal temp, and before long, I was helping a new operations manager set up a new work center on a very sensitive and important contract. After about a year, most of the people I started with were gone. A few were released at the end of the temp job, but most of the original crew were terminated because they broke one of the many rules. And there was essentially no tolerance for any rule breaking at all. One aspect of the work I did involved onboarding new hires in a group setting. It was my responsibility to ensure they understood what they were being hired to do and set proper expectations for performance.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I did this, I stated each rule word for word, starting with, you must, blah, 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 and followed each one by saying, or you will be fired. And by the 4th or 5th rule, they started chiming in. So it kind of turned into this half serious, half comedic thing where, it was like a pitch and response. I'd say, you must, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, they'd say, or you will be fired. So then afterwards, I took a moment to explain why I did it that way. I told them I've been here for a while, against the odds, and I want you to be aware of the consequences so that you can avoid them and you can stay here for a long time too. I don't know you yet, but I hope to get to know each of you, and I don't want you to have to look for another job, especially as the holiday season is quickly approaching. The vast majority of that first crew was still there when I left the organization a year later. I ran into one of them many years later, and he expressed gratitude for showing that someone cared about us, even if the organization as a whole saw us as expendable. That moment taught me that connection doesn't come from softening the truth, it comes from caring enough to explain it. Some people connect intuitively. They have high interpersonal intelligence. They seem to value people automatically. Others recognize connecting as important but lack the tools and techniques they need to learn to do what others do intuitively. And some people don't recognize connecting as important at all. They think they can do it all on their own. They don't need other people. Why rely on others when it's quicker to do it yourself? If you want something done right, do it yourself. They'd only let you down anyway, right? So the better we're able to connect with other people, the better our results. Someone once asked, well, what about rocket scientists? Does this apply to them too? I thought about it for a while. I said, well, which skill is more important or more rare? A rocket scientist or someone who can lead a team of rocket scientists to produce meaningful results in a coordinated fashion, on time and under budget? Or better yet, the CEO of Rocket Scientists Incorporated. Often, the more brilliant people are, the more difficult they are to lead. So we need people, and people are emotional creatures. So to continue to try and outline the problem, picture this. Here's a typical leader in an organization. He may be the owner of the company or the leader of his department, any kind of leader, it doesn't really matter. Now, earlier I said everyone wants to improve their results. The company owner wants to improve results. The leader wants to improve his results. Everyone on the team wants to get better and improve their results. Given that we're all different, we can assume that we all want different results. Different things are important to each of us, right? So we could think of this as the direction the person wants to go. This person wants to go this direction, another person wants to go that direction, etc. But if the leader of the organization wants to improve his results, they're talking about getting everyone to move together, right? If they're not a connector, if they don't value others, then there's a tendency to think that the way to get everyone moving together is for that leader to work harder by himself or herself, and then tell everyone else to do the same. After all, how do most people get leadership positions in most organizations? It's normally some kind of a technical assessment, right? You get really good at doing your technical job, and then they say, oh, you can write code really well. Do you want to lead the programmers? It's not the same thing, right? Technical skills are technical, and leadership is influence. It's connecting with people, which comes from valuing people. The problem here is that leadership and technical skills are two totally different skill sets. In a technical skill, valuing people is like the polar opposite of the technical skill. One's left brain and one's right brain. I think I had a thing here. The technician simply doesn't see the world this way. Right? The technicians tend to think if you want people to do something specific, you have to give them specific instructions or tell them exactly what to do and when to do it. So the leader who can't connect works harder themselves. And what happens? What happens when they have to work harder? Well, the leader works maybe 20 or 30% harder. And then what happens? The overall effort of the team, it might go up a little bit, but we're talking about a major difference in the leader's life, right? Maybe a minor difference in the overall organization, but a huge difference in the leader's life. If you got to spend a third more time working, well, now you're talking about impacting your relationship with your wife, your kids, anything that you try to do outside of work. And oh, by the way, What about the time that you're spending at work? Are you being effective there? The connector realizes if they could just get another 10% out of everybody in the team, then it adds up to far more than they can contribute themselves. And as a result, they don't get divorced. Leadership is influence. Leadership is results through others. It's all about others. But the reason connecting is such a skill is it's more complicated than just saying, okay, I'm going to get more out of others. It's not something you just decide to do or even legislate. You have to connect and convince those you're trying to lead. If you recall, I mentioned that anyone can learn how to make every communication an opportunity for a powerful connection. It's really just like any other skill. You need to learn the skill and practice it. That brings me to this principle. Connecting is more a skill than a natural talent. And I love this quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. All great speakers were bad speakers first. And that definitely describes me. I was terrible whenever I first started speaking. Probably not much better now, but I was definitely really, really bad when I first started speaking. Connecting is something anyone can learn to do, but one must study communication to improve at it. To connect with others, you must make the most of the skills and experience you have. There are several factors that great communicators, great connectors draw upon to cause people to listen to them. The first is relationships, who you know. A quick way to gain credibility with an individual, a group, or an audience is to borrow it from someone who's already got credibility with them. Right. So in 2005, I lived in Washington, D.C. I was on active duty, but I was training reservists at the Navy's largest training facility in Washington, D.C. After a few years of doing this, I'd built enough relationships that people started asking if I thought about, what I was going to do whenever my time there was up. Was I going to get out? I had about 10 years on active duty at that point. So was I going to get out? Was I going to try to find a job there in DC? Was I going to re-enlist and go somewhere else? So I thought about this quite a bit. And I felt like I was kind of being pulled in that direction. And so I started interviewing with different agencies there in DC. And eventually I found my way into this one place in particular. I sat down, we exchanged pleasantries with the person who was interviewing me, and he asked me to sit down at this table, and didn't really say much to me. Didn't really ask me any questions. He just kind of looked at my resume, and then he flipped to the back page where I had my references, and he skims down the list of references, and he finds a name, and he says, "Hey, you know this person?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "How do you know this person?" And I said, "Well, it's my commanding officer at my current command." And he said, "Okay, hold on." And so he left the room. And I just sat there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I'm thinking, has this guy forgotten that I exist? Like, where did he go? And then he comes back into the room, and all he does, it was like a movie. He just kind of slid this piece of paper across the table, had a number written on it, and he said, "Can you start on Monday?" And I said, "Yes, I can." And so I just sat there for a second. I was stunned, and I realized how much a single relationship can change the direction of your life. Who you know can open the door for you to connect with someone, and you never know where that connection might lead. In this case, it wasn't about my resume, it was about trust. My commanding officer trusted me because I had connected with him. He, my interviewer connected my commanding officer because they had connected years earlier. I was able to gain my interviewer's trust because our connections aligned with each other, and connections create trust, and trust opens doors, right? So does anybody have any questions yet? We still got a little bit to go here. That's the
Just want to make sure, but that's all.
all right. So the next part here is insight, what you know. So if you share an idea of expertise, if you share an area of expertise generously with others, you give people reasons to respect you and develop a sense of connection with you. We often think this means we must first become an expert in something before we begin trying to help others. Allow me to disabuse you of that notion. You only need to be more knowledgeable than the person you're trying to help. If you were only ever able to help people once you had a PhD in something, then it's unlikely anyone would ever become better at anything, right? When I was young, I cultivated a love of reading, and I still enjoy reading to this day. About 15 years ago, I began reading books that I thought held wisdom that I did not yet have, or at least I didn't recognize that I possessed. For example, the book we're talking about today falls into that category. This is sometimes called personal development or self help or motivational books, but I like to think of them as books of wisdom because often the authors talk about all the failures and setbacks they had on their way to success. About 3 or 4 years into this effort, I found myself lying on a massage table talking to a massage therapist with a really interesting mind. In each of our sessions over about a year and a half, we would discuss books we were reading and things we had learned from them. She eventually told me she was interested in expanding her business and doing more. I shared the information I had, challenged her limiting beliefs, and encouraged her to pursue her dreams. Today, her massage business has multiple thriving locations. She owns 3 other successful businesses, and she's living a life she truly loves. Shortly after her initial success, she sent me a very touching message thanking me for the encouragement. My love of reading allowed me to have the right insights at the right time to add value to her when she needed it. She did the work. I simply shared what I'd been learning. Sometimes the right insight at the right moment can spark something powerful in someone else. I didn't have a degree in business or massage therapy. I just had a few insights that turned out to be useful. Sometimes that's all it takes. Over time, when you act on those insights, when you turn what you know into what you've done, and people start to trust your experience. And that's the next principle, success, what you've done. People want to be successful, and they seek out others who have accomplished something to get their advice. Here again, you don't have to be a multimillionaire to give advice. You simply need to be a little more successful than the person you're giving advice to. If you're a full-time employee at some megacorp, it's unlikely someone who owns 3 business locations is going to seek out your advice on anything. However, it's extremely likely that someone who just joined your company would seek your advice on which activities seem to produce the best results and which people seem to be the ones to know. In my opinion, it's important to contextualize any advice based on where the advice giver is in their journey compared to where you are in your journey. I often hear people who have crossed the $1 million threshold in coaching saying things like, these shortcuts will help you start generating 25K months now, or secrets I wish I knew when I started out, or perhaps the least helpful, you should be charging more for your services. The problem with these statements is that they give listeners who are just starting their journey a perspective that is not just bad, but completely useless to them. The reason those shortcuts helped that millionaire is because they spent the time to understand their path without the shortcuts. The reason those secrets made sense to the millionaire is because they made the mistakes and learned to recognize what worked along the way. The reason the millionaire can charge higher prices is because they have learned how to position their services and they have built a book of business which gives them credibility, neither of which is something a new business owner usually starts out with. The problem isn't that their advice is bad. It's that it's not for you yet. Advice is only as useful as the experience you bring to it. Mark Twain famously quipped, when I was a boy of about 14, my father was so ignorant I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to be 21, I was astonished at how much the old man had learned in 7 years. I often give my children advice and guidance, and now that I have 4 total, 2 of which are teens, I'm starting to recognize the glazed expressions they give when my advice holds no meaning for them. It's not that they lack intelligence. It's that they lack the experience that gives my advice meaning. Connection requires context. The more we live, the more our successes give our words weight. And that's what success does. It gives people a reason to listen, to trust, and to connect. If you're successful in anything you do, there will be people who will want to listen to you and connect with you. Success earns you credibility. It shows people what's possible. But credibility alone isn't enough. You can't just have done something. You also have to be able to do something again and again with consistency and excellence. That's where the next principle comes in. Ability, what you can do. If you have a high level of ability in an area, others may want to connect with you because of that ability. I like to go to the gym, and yeah, that's me, doing a 550-pound squat. I like pushing my body, and even as Father Time begins to turn the corner with me, I continue to work hard to build and maintain strength. My best lifts so far are 550-pound squat, which you see there, a 450-pound deadlift, 365-pound bench press, and 265-pound standing overhead press. Because I spent a lot of time getting stronger, I've also spent a lot of time recovering from injuries. John Maxwell might say I was learning to do things correctly. Therefore, when I'm in the gym, I tend to watch people who look like they are new and offer them guidance and encouragement. I helped one young lady over a few sessions one summer, and she first approached me after seeing me squat nearly twice what anyone else in the gym was lifting. She was exceptionally strong, even with the flaws in her form. I gave her some advice and helped her improve her form and encouraged her to enter a competition. She told me she never competed before and had never even considered it. A few weeks later, she got married and moved away. Nearly a year had passed, and honestly, I forgot all about it. And then one day I received a message on Instagram from someone who I was not connected to. I initially ignored it. Something about the message got the better of my curiosity, and at the end of the next day, I opened it. It was a picture of a first place trophy from a powerlifting competition with a message that read, "So, I did a thing. Thanks for opening my mind to it." Excellence connects, but character keeps the connection alive. Some people may admire what you can do, but they're moved by how you live. And that's the final principle. Sacrifice how you have lived. If you've made sacrifices, suffered tragedy, or overcome painful obstacles, many people will relate to you. In 2012, I was under tremendous stress. I had left a 15-year military career 3 years earlier, and for long stretches, I couldn't find steady work. The wealth I'd built was gone, replaced by a poverty I'd never known. We had a 2-year-old daughter, and my wife was pregnant with my first son. I was months behind on my mortgage, depending on government programs to offset some of the costs, and failing to understand how people manage to dig themselves out of debt without being able to find better paying work. I spent most of my evenings as drunk as I could possibly get if I didn't have to work. One morning, my daughter climbed into the large, comfy chair I was in so she could sit next to me as we watched TV. I looked over at her innocent smile, and for some reason, I was overwhelmed with emotion. I began weeping uncontrollably, and my wife walked into the room and saw me. "What's wrong?" she asked. "I don't know, but I can't keep doing this anymore." That was the day I stopped drinking and the day I made a commitment to live differently. For that, for me, that meant giving my life to Christ. I wish I could tell you that my life suddenly changed and everything immediately became better. And in some ways, it certainly did. But we lost our home to foreclosure a few months later and had to move into a small house my parents owned. Now, I didn't just have to provide for my wife and kids and try to find a way to pay bills. Now I was also getting pressure from my parents who clearly didn't understand what was so hard about going out and just getting a job in 2009, 10, 11, and 12. The stress got so intense that I started having these really bad headaches. I tried several kinds of pain relievers, but nothing seemed to help. After about a week of really intense pain, I woke up one morning and half of my face had stopped working. The doctors later told me that I had Bell's palsy. I was on the verge of sinking into depression, and I think I probably would have succumbed to it if it had not been for my wife and the prior couple of months that we spent establishing connections with people at our new church. I believe that it was because of them, their kindness, and their faith that I recovered most of the use of my face within about a year. It still bothers me at times, and about 3 years ago, roughly 10 years since the first attack, I had a second round of it, which attacked the other side of my face. So first the right half, and then the left half, and still have some weird things happening with my lip. But this time I felt it coming. I knew what to expect, and although it was still hard to accept, I began to make jokes about it almost immediately. There's very little can be done about it, so the only options really are to either cry about it or accept it as the new reality and keep moving forward. I chose acceptance. Many people ask what caused it. I honestly don't know, although I think it was a combination of quitting alcohol and exceptional levels of stress I'd never faced before. What I do know is that I'm grateful for my faith. I'm grateful for my sobriety. And if the loss of use of portions of my face was the price, then I would gladly pay it again. If you can remain positive and humble through life's difficulties, others will see not just your strength, but your heart. Because connection doesn't come from perfection, it comes from perseverance. These 5 factors, relationships, insight, success, ability, and sacrifice, are just the beginning. Whatever your story, whatever your experience, use it. Every scar, every victory, every lesson can help someone. The more you live these principles, the more people will feel safe to connect with you. Because in the end, connection isn't about impressing others, it's about inviting them in. Max Dupree, author of Leadership as an Art and the former CEO of Herman Miller, said, "There may be no single thing more important in our efforts to achieve meaningful work and fulfilling relationships than to learn to practice the art of communication." I couldn't agree more. So let's recap what we've learned. Leadership matters because anything worthwhile you'll ever achieve in life will be done with people and through people. Everything rises and falls on leadership. And what is leadership? Leadership is influence. How do we increase that influence? We learn to connect. And how do we get better at connecting? We learn to value people. That requires a shift in perspective, taking yourself out of the center and placing others there instead. So now let's talk about a practice that will help you do that, a practice that will help you connect better today. I used to think it was all about being the best. If you want to lead, you have to be the best. If you want people to listen to you, you've got to impress them. But influence is not about impressing people, it's about connecting with them. It's not a logical thing, it's an emotional thing. Remember, we said earlier that people are emotional beings. They're not principally logical, they're principally emotional. To understand how to connect with people emotionally, we need to understand that we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are, and we're all different. Let me try to illustrate what I mean by that. How many of you see a black or a yellow urn here? How many of you see 2 faces? Yeah. Now that now that I said both of those things, are you able to see the other one? Yeah. So it's not about necessarily the perspective that you go in with, but it's about your perspective. And then whenever you become enlightened, that, oh, there's a different thing that I can see there, right? It's the same picture is viewed differently by different people. So if the picture is the same, then the difference must be in the individual, right? There's something different that's happened to the average adult that changes the way they see things. That difference, the reason we see things differently, is called conditioning. We don't see the world as it is, we see it the way we are. This goes a long way towards explaining why we don't get what we want, we get what we are. The implications for this are enormous, especially as it relates to communication. We all see the world differently, different beliefs, different values, different priorities, passions, expectations, and so on. To ignore this when we're trying to connect is to miss the whole point of connection. Connectors understand this. They know they have to connect with people on common ground. See, if I talk to you about my beliefs or my values and they're not yours, you're probably not that interested intellectually. There's certainly no emotional resonance. You can't relate to me. You don't have a good feeling about me. Worse yet, if I violate your beliefs while I do it, now, not only do you not get a good feeling, you actually get a bad feeling. No one wants to be told what they believe is wrong. If you challenge someone's beliefs directly, you're going to get their back up. And if if they are the core beliefs, what they really value, they might want to hurt you. This is the ego in its stripped down, raw state. It wants to exterminate everyone that doesn't agree with it. So if you want to connect with someone, you've got to go to them. You have to go first. You need to connect on common ground, right? Where our beliefs and theirs intersect, that's common ground. We can connect with them here and then take them where we want to go. If you don't connect, they won't go with you. Connection takes effort, it takes energy. But then again, so does everything worthwhile in life. You have to sow before you can reap. So go first, value others, look for common ground. Because when you connect with people and really connect, you don't just change conversations, you change lives. And that's what leadership is all about. And we're just about out of time, so we're going to have to leave it there. But hopefully, we've covered some information that you'll not only find interesting, but some ideas that you can start using right away. Just before we finish up, let me just cover this one last thing, because I think it's key to any kind of program of change. How many of you have found this interesting and enjoyable? All right. I've shared this message with a lot of groups, and it's always well received because the principles work. The trouble is, it doesn't have the impact it needs to have for one simple reason. Change is not an event, it's a process. We have a tendency to overestimate the event and a tendency to underestimate the process. You see, an event, which is important, won't develop you as a communicator and connector, but it can get you started on becoming better. If you think about it, to develop as a communicator and connector, we're talking about changing our behaviors. And unfortunately, we can't just snap our fingers and be changed. I wish we had time to talk more about this book. I would love to share some of the other principles and practices with you, but I want to honor your time. So we can continue to communicate and connect the way we have been, or we can choose to intentionally develop these skills to increase our influence and leadership, and ultimately improve our results. So let's get back to where we started. There's still only one thing that stands between you and greater success in every area of your life: your ability to connect with people. But the difference now is that you know it's not something you're born with, it's something you can build. When you do, you'll not only improve your results, you'll improve your relationships, your leadership, and your life. So we've only had time to briefly touch on a few of these principles for communicating and connecting. Imagine what would happen if you or your whole team took a deeper dive into these lessons together. What could that do for your communication, your relationships, or your personal growth? As we close, I'd love to have you open the link that is here. You can scan that, or you can, if you're a glutton for punishment, you can just use that little URL at the bottom there. And just answer this one question. It's just a one question survey. Yes or no? Would studying this kind of material help you and your company achieve better results? Yes or no? I hope this session has added value to you today. Thank you for your attentiveness. Thank you, Clay. Thank you, H7, for the opportunity to be with you. It's been an honor to share this time together. I'm a coach, speaker, and trainer with the John Maxwell team, and my name is Zach Parker. I am your friend. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.